Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Everything starts way back, long before Luffy met Dory and Broggy in Little Garden. Maybe even before the most important events involving Roger's crew. Because the presence of the giants has always been somewhat hidden in the story, as if Oda were placing the pieces in silence, waiting for the right moment. And when you stop and think that Elbaf is described as the proudest and most powerful land among all warrior cultures, and yet it's been sidelined the whole time, it gives the feeling that there's something there that's been kept under wraps for far too long. And it's in that silence that Loki is born. Maybe Loki grew up by hearing stories about Rock's Xebec. Maybe the giants themselves were once drawn to that man who wasn't afraid of the system and who somehow managed to unite beasts no one else dared to lead. It's curious to think that Xebec's name is still a taboo. Almost no one talks about him. Not Garp, not Sengoku, not even the Yonku who fought alongside or against him. It's as if speaking of Xebec would summon a shadow no one wants to return. But that's exactly the kind of shadow a boy like Loki, resentful, rebellious, and eager to carve his name into history, would fall in love with. I think in some way Loki became the heir to Rox's idea. Not by bloodline, not by heritage, but by how he interpreted the world's rejection and decided to respond with fire. If there really was a meeting between Rox and Loki when Loki was still a child, it makes sense that it would have shaped his mind. Maybe it was just a visit. Maybe Rox went to Elbaf in search of strength, knowing that if he could conquer the giants, he could bend the world. And maybe Loki saw something in him that no one else did. Not a monster, but someone free. And freedom, to someone born into a culture of honor and tradition like Elbaf, might look exactly like that. Destruction, because to build something new, sometimes you have to tear down the old. That's what makes Loki's claim of being the sun god sound so different from Luffy's. Luffy wants to laugh. Loki wants to burn everything down. But why would someone use the name sun god if they didn't know its true meaning? Why would someone born in Elbaf with its own mythology start using the exact name that's now associated with Joy Boy? Maybe because that name, that legend of the sun god, existed before Joy Boy. Maybe Rox already knew about it. Maybe the fruit Luffy now has, the Hito no Mi model Nika, once belonged to Rox, and that's why he had such a massive impact. Which makes me think that maybe, just maybe, Rox had the same fruit as Luffy, but he wasn't Joy Boy. And that changes everything. Because if he had the power, but not the joy, if he had the freedom but not the laughter, then maybe he never awakened, or maybe he awakened to something else. It's like the fruit is a bridge, and each person who crosses it sees a different world on the other side. For Luffy, that bridge leads to freedom. For Rox, it might have led to control, to total domination, where laughter becomes ruin. And then you start to realize it's not the power that defines the man, but the heart that carries it. And maybe that's what Loki didn't understand, or understood all too well. Loki isn't like Luffy. Luffy fights with a smile because he's not afraid of falling. Loki maybe knows the pain of not being heard, of being underestimated. Maybe his father tried to keep him away from all of this. Maybe he grew up believing he would be king, and when he realized the world already had too many kings, he decided to become a god. And not just any god, but the same god Rox wanted to be. Maybe that's even why Oda never showed Rox's face. Maybe it's because, if he did, we'd see traces of Luffy there, an echo of what could have been. And maybe, just maybe, Loki is trying to finish what he started, not out of loyalty, but because he believes it's the only way to be heard in a world that never even got his name right. We look at Luffy and think he's the heir to Roger's will. But who carries the will of Rox? Who wakes up with anger in their chest? Not because they want to rule, but because they want to restart everything in a world that rejects change. Maybe it's Loki. And when he says he's going to be the sun god, he's not talking about the same being of laughter and joy that Luffy represents. He's talking about a solar god in the oldest sense of the word. A god that burns. A god that destroys in order to be reborn. And for Elbaf, that might sound like heresy or salvation. It depends on who's listening. The fact that he chose that name and that goal might be more than coincidence. It could be inheritance. Not by blood, but by spirit. Rox's will, which never disappeared, that stayed dormant. Maybe in Elbaf, maybe in the heart of a boy who wanted to be more than a prince. He wanted to be eternal. Maybe that's why he's been preparing all these years, waiting for the right moment to step onto the stage. And now that Luffy also carries the title of Sun God, all of this feels like more than just coincidence. It feels like a clash between two possible futures. And that's where all the pieces start to make even more sense. Because deep down, I think Oda has been saying this without saying it. The difference between Luffy and those who want the title of Sun God isn't just in the name, but in what each one means by it. Luffy never wanted to be a god, never wanted to be king of the world. Luffy wants to be free. That's it. He wants to be the pirate king because to him, that means total freedom. Loki, if he's truly following in Rox's footsteps, wants the world for himself. He wants to put the entire world under his control, and that completely changes the intention. When Luffy awakened his fruit back in chapter 1044, we saw that he became something the Gorosei feared, a kind of entity tied to laughter, chaos, and freedom. But that freedom is playful, it's joyful, it's light. Even in the fight against Kaido, even transformed, Luffy never loses his smile. He's not trying to destroy everything to become sovereign. He's trying to protect everything so that everyone can live free. It's a completely different spirit. Now think about Loki, the way he showed up in Elbaf, saying he'll be the sun god who brings destruction to the world. That already sets the tone. He doesn't want to free anyone. He wants to end the current system, not to make way for a new one, but to sit on the empty throne. Because maybe since he was a child, he felt like the throne of the world was already his by right. And if it's true that he's a descendant of warriors raised to rule Elbaf, maybe he never accepted that the world never bowed to Elbaf. Maybe he grew up with a sense of superiority mixed with resentment. And when he saw one day someone like Rox, who defied the world with laughter, who spoke of destroying the entire system and building something new from the ashes, maybe he thought, that's what I want. But what Loki may have never realized is that Rox himself, deep down, didn't want a new world. He wanted the old world, just with himself in charge of everything. And that, in my view, isn't freedom. It's control. It's obsession. It's the same path that Emu followed. The path of not allowing any more choices, only obedience. Loki's presence as a possible heir to Rox's will makes him not just a villain by ideology, but also by purpose. Because if his desire is the same, to dominate the world, then it doesn't matter if he uses words like God or Sun. He is not the same kind of figure Luffy represents. And maybe that's exactly the message behind the similarity in their titles. Two sun gods, but one burns to bring freedom and the other burns to impose control. I think Oda always works with this contrast, like two brothers walking different paths. Luffy as the new Joy Boy, Loki perhaps as the new Rox, one smiling, the other gritting his teeth. And when you look at Rox's footsteps, told only in fragments, chapters like 957 and 1095, where his name appears like a ghost that once shook the world, you realize that the world's fear of him isn't about what he did, but about what he almost did. He almost became the center of everything. He almost became the new axis. And maybe Loki, who grew up in a forgotten corner of the world, clung to that as a chance to never be forgotten. Maybe he spent his whole life waiting for a new era of chaos so he could rise as the one to bring order, his order. All of this highlights the contrast with Luffy even more. Luffy doesn't want a throne. He doesn't want fame. He doesn't want the world on its knees. Luffy wants the open sea, friends by his side, and the freedom to choose his own path. That is what it means to be Joy Boy. That is what it means to be the sun god, in the sense of laughter, dance, and life. Meanwhile, Loki seems more interested in wiping everything out and building something where his is the only name remembered. And so the resemblance to Rox might not be just ideological, maybe even physical. Maybe Oda hasn't shown Rox's face because if he did, we'd recognize in him the same look we've already seen in Loki. Maybe that's the point. The silence of Rox's face echoing in the gaze of the giant prince. And if Rox really had the Hito Hito no Mi model, Nika, and didn't awaken as Joy Boy, that changes a lot. Because it shows that it's not the fruit that defines destiny, but the spirit of the one who eats it. And maybe that's the true fear of the Gorosei. Not the fruit's power itself, but the possibility of someone like Rox or someone like Loki awakening again with that power and using it the wrong way. Because if a sun god chooses to erase everything instead of bringing life, then the world loses more than it gains. And I think the world itself feels that risk, as if it has memory, as if the sea itself is afraid that the wrong will might awaken in the right body. So if Loki truly wants to become the new sun god, maybe he's not saying it with reverence, but with hunger, with desire. He wants that title because he knows it's a name that brings fear, a symbol that carries weight. Maybe he's trying to claim that symbol for himself. So the world looks at him with the same mix of fear and respect it once had for Rox. And the problem with that is, by doing so, he reveals that he doesn't want to change the game. He wants to win the current one. And that's exactly where we see who he truly is. Deep down, I believe the final battle between Luffy and Loki Loki, if it really happens, won't just be a clash of power, of hockey, of devil fruits or strategies. It will be a battle of meanings. What does it mean to be the sun god? What does freedom mean? What does it mean to win? One will be fighting so that everyone can dance. The other will be fighting so that only he can rule. And that alone already tells us who truly carries the light. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.